All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Livolan Pascal. I'm a PhD student at Queen's University. I can try to show you that on the map. Queen's University is in the city of Kingston, Ontario, Canada. And my mobility is at McMaster University. You will see how far it is from Queen's. It's just on the other side of Lake Ontario. And I guess on the very large scale, on the worldwide scale, we could go further away, right, for mobility. But it definitely makes sense for us to go to McMaster, and I'm going to try to explain that first. Along the video, I will give some details about the research I'm doing, but I will start by saying that it is related to the Canadian nuclear industry. And a lot of universities across Canada are working in relationship with that industry to try and help on several topics. And I think that some of you who watched the video are familiar with some of these topics. The McMaster University, and especially in our case, we wanted to collaborate with Professor Joey Kish, is very well equipped, among others, to do electrochemistry. For my research, it is highly recommended, if not necessary, to do some electrochemical studies. And here is why. I work on what we call stress corrosion cracking. That is the combined effect of corrosion and stresses or stress concentrations that initiate and propagate cracks in a material. Now, it still makes sense to focus, for example, specifically on corrosion or the environment via electrochemical studies to try to have an image of the behavior of our material, electrochemically speaking, in the environments of interest. So I guess it's a good time to try and explain more in details what I'm doing. Now, we are interested in ions that are particularly annoying, the chloride ions. They are annoying because they have that capacity to break the passivity of a stainless steel that otherwise would be quite performant regarding resistance to corrosion. But those chloride ions, they can develop pitching, that is a form of localized corrosion that can combine with stress and in the good conditions lead to stress corrosion cracking. Now, what are these good conditions? For a long time we thought that below 100 degrees C in water containing chloride ions, well, you wouldn't really get stress corrosion cracking for the material I am studying, that is stainless steel 304L. I will not develop too much what it is. Just note that it's widely used in industry, and among others, it is used for the Calandria vessel in the nuclear reactors in Canada. But unfortunately, things happened, among them relatively dramatic things like the roof of a swimming pool that fell on people and killed a lot of people, that questioned that data. And quite logically, and it's been decades now, we know that chloride-induced stress corrosion cracking can happen at lower temperatures. This is what we are working on my research project. We try to understand the chloride-induced stress corrosion cracking on our stainless steel 304L at temperatures that are relatively low, say 100 degrees C or below. In the frame of that research, there is some work that has been done in the 90s that suggests that CLSCC for stainless steel is most susceptible to happen when the electrochemical potential of our stainless steel is between the pitching or crevice potential and the repassivation potential. Now here we arrive on some of the work I've been doing at McMaster and some of concepts that are purely electrochemistry. Now, what is this electrochemical potential and what does that mean? Well, let me jump right into a plot, a curve that I obtained at McMaster. So what we are looking at here is what I will call CP curves. I think the correct term is cyclic potential dynamic polarization curves. I will not go too much into details. I will assume that if you watch the video, you either have the concepts that are associated to that, or you will soon.
Well, yes, Pascal, let us go into details a little bit.
What I'm showing here is the evolution of a current in response to the variation of an electrochemical potential. The potential E is always given versus the electrode it has been measured with, because we can use different electrodes. Usually we would give a current density, so a current per unit of area. Here I give a total current, and I hope that what I say at the end of the video will explain why I'm doing this and will convince you that it is a good choice. I also want to add that we can commonly see this type of graphs shown as I'm showing you, or with the current density in the horizontal axis and the potential on the vertical one. The current density is always given in a logarithmic scale. I associate the electrochemical potential to the force that is given to electrical charges, it can be electrons, to cross the interface between the sample and the environment it is exposed to. That force also has a direction. Here we go towards positive values. That means that we are encouraging the electrical charges to go from the material towards the environment. The current is associated to the number of charges that are exchanged. The higher the current, the more electrical charges are exchanged, and so the faster the material is corroding. Here we see that at the very left of the curve, the current is very low. Actually, we can even consider it as being equal to 0. Here, the reason that our net current is going from 0 to a given value means that we have more charges leaving the material than charges getting back in. At first, we reach kind of a plateau, right, for a very long time. This is what we describe as passivity. Yes, there is a loss of electron, but it is not that significant. And all of a sudden it jumps for several orders of magnitude. This is what we call pitting. This is when our material is not passive anymore. Our sample is now corroding. Now, when you go back towards more negative potentials, maybe instinctively you would expect the potential to follow the same path the other way around. But we can see here that the current stays quite high for a while before going back to the passive state. This is what we call repassivation. So you have a pitting potential and you have a repassivation potential. Those two properties are what we are interested in our research.
If you look at my curves here, you see that compared to this one, the jump is not that steep, right? This is what I'll try to explain at the end of the video. So the idea was to get this data that you can see here. So we have 5 different curves that gives us 5 different repassivation potential, or hopefully these are repassivation potential. So the idea was to try to get to the repassivation potential actually slightly above that potential by introducing an oxidant, because we could not do that using a potentiostat because of our experimental setup. And the choice was to try with ferric chloride. Here you have a typical behavior of the OCP while I am heating up and while I am sparging some gas to get the oxygen away of the solution. This is usually what happens. And here you have the spots where I introduce the ferric chloride for a total of 3 milliliter. And after that, I don't do anything. I just record for hours and hours. Note that 10 to the 4 here, it's in seconds, but it's a lot of seconds. It's actually from 2 hours to 20 hours. And I look at the OCP and I see, okay, it's kind of stable because we started at minus 326 millivolts versus the calomel electrode, and we end up at minus 345 millivolts versus that same electrode for a very long time. So in terms of stability, ferric chloride is a good candidate to try to drive the electrochemical potential chemically. Now, the problem with this is the pH. The change of concentration in chloride can be neglected, but the pH changes towards quite acidic solution, which means that those first curves that we obtained here, they were obtained for a pH that is relatively neutral. So we are not in such an environment anymore. We are way too away in terms of pH. So these curves are not so useful anymore, because in a pH 2 environment, that value will probably change. That means that the amount of ferric chloride necessary to get to the potential we would like to get has an impact on the pH that changes the environment so much that we cannot trust anymore, or we cannot rely anymore on the data we got initially. That means that now we will try, I will go back to McMaster, and we will try to do those same curves in an acidic environment of pH 2 and look at what is the repassivation potential there, and then try to get there using ferric chloride. I hope this gives you an idea of what we did at McMaster and what we are doing in the future. And I hope I was fast enough so that you do not get bored, and clear enough so that you could follow what we did here. Okay, so a little bonus to the video. I'm going above the 10 minutes I was aiming for, but I really want to show you this. So here, what you can see is the samples that we were using to do our electrochemical studies. We were taping some conductive wire on the back of it, taping it with conductive tape, and on the other side mounting it in a cold resin, and on the other side we were putting some nail polish on the edges. The role of that nail polish was to try to avoid the infiltration of water inside the resin. At room temperature, that nail polish works really well, but when you go to 90 degrees C, actually my theory is that it softened a little bit, and if you look here, you can see those brown marks as a square. So you have a crevice corrosion that is developing between the interface of the nail polish and the sample. So that would be like in the edges here. Yeah, so hopefully you can see the brown mark here. And actually in our case, we did want to get crevice corrosion. So that is a good news. But the problem is, I think by developing below that nail polish layer, the corrosion happening there changes over time the surface area that is actually reacting, which means that, you know, you are supposed to show in the CP curves the current per unit of area, but I am not sure of the value of the unit per area. So yeah, I thought maybe it would have been interesting to conclude on this, to show that even something quite classical as CP curves could have still some complexity. I hope you enjoyed that video.